Pambihira yan. Sulat lang pala akong sulat dito. Hindi ko naintindihan. Boy, alam mo ba ito, boy?
Ha?
Sa car kanina.
Hindi ko nga alam mag-gets yan eh. Sabaw na sabaw ako kanina eh. Tanong na lang natin, ano? Ay,
Ito si Jam,
ito
oh.
si Jam.
Alam mo ba yung jam?
Alin?
Yung sa circular flow kanina sa ito.
Yung nilesson ni sir.
Oo, madali lang yun. Di ba dati may discuss na sir na circular flow? Sinasabi kasi doon, whenever one sector is using its money for the purchase of others' output, it becomes an income of that sector and vice versa. So parang sinabi lang doon na total spending is equal to total income. Eh kaso diba parang unrealistic naman i-assume na lahat ng income ng household sector ginagastos nila. Siyempre diba yung ibang pera sinisave. Kaya magdadagdag tayo ng financial sector sa model natin. Kapag nagsisave sila, ang tawag doon leakage or outflow. Kasi kapag itinabi mo yung pera, hindi na babalik yung perang yun sa circular flow. Pero hindi rin naman puro savings lang, yung iba nag-i-invest. Kapag nag-i-invest ka, ang tawag naman doon, injection. Kasi bumabalik sa circular flow yung pera. Kapag foreign investment naman, magkakaroon muna ng injection. Kasi nag-invest sila eh. It will bring employment and more production. Pero karamihan ng foreign investors, binabalik yung profit sa country nila. So nagkaka-leakage sa economy natin kasi hindi na bumabalik sa atin yung pera. Tawag sa process na to ay profit repatriation. Yun. Alam naman natin na malaki ang role ng government sa economy natin. Kaya magdadagdag tayo ng government sector sa model natin. The government imposes taxes to support a wide range of budgetary programs. Both household and business sectors are required to pay their corresponding taxes. Kaya yung tax, leakage siya sa circular flow. Pero yung government, inagastos nila yung kinikita nila galing sa taxes. Sa sweldo ng public servants, sa mga construction, sa mga public school, mga ganon. Kaya yung government expenditure or spending ay injection sa circular flow. Tapos dadagdagan naman natin ng overseas sector yung model natin. Dahil hindi naman lahat ng pera na umiikot sa economy natin, sa bansa lang natin galing. Ang Philippines ay may open economy, which simply means na nag-i-import and nag-i-export tayo. Importation is a leakage in the circular flow. Kasi yung perang binayad sa imports ay di na bumabalik sa economy natin. Dun siya napupunta sa bansang pinanggalingan ng product. Kaya kapag tumaas yung imports, bababa ang national income natin. Yung exportation of goods naman is considered as injections, circular flow. Kasi yung pinagbentahan ng mga yon, babalik sa economy natin. Kaya kapag tumaas yung exports natin, tataas din yung national income natin. Leakage is that part of income that leaks out of the circular flow and causes to slow down the rate of movement of income. Based sa mga sinabi ko kanina, yung mga leakage ay yung savings, taxes, and imports. Yung inflows naman or injections allow the flow of income to rise within a certain economy. Yung mga injection, yung investments, government spending or expenditure, saka yung proceeds from exports. Tapos, yung ibang economies, gumagamit sila ng mga equation para ma-express yung epekto ng inflow and outflow sa circular flow sa national income. So, yung formula, Y is equal to C plus S. Y is equal to income, C is equal to consumption, tapos S is equal to saving. So, pareho lang yon with the business sector, where firms spend their money either on the production that is consumed in the period it was produced or on investments. Kaya magiging Y is equal to C plus 1 yung equation. Yung Y, yung expenditure or total spending. C, production that is consumed in the period it was produced. Tapos yung I, investment. Tapos, pag pinagsama yung dalawang equation, makakancel yung C. Kaya ang matitira na lang ay I is equal to S. Pinapakita nito na equal yung ginagastos ng business sector sa income na natatanggap ng household sector. So, yung national income, nagdedepende siya sa level of consumption ng household sector saka sa level of investment ng business sector. As mentioned earlier, ginagastos ng government yung income nila through government expenditure and government spending. Yung paggastos sila na yun ay injection sa circular flow. Kaya magiging y is equal to c plus I plus g yung equation. As sabi kanina sa circular flow model, import is considered as leakage. Tapos yung export is an injection to the economy. Kaya yung final equation ay y is equal to c plus I plus g plus quantity x minus m. Remember that the circular flow model is just a framework that explains how each sector works in performing complex economic activities. Yun na yun.
Ganito pala yun eh.
Di ba may nililesson din sir na GDP kanina? Paano yun?
Aalis na ako eh. Kay sir niyo lang tanong.
Wait, sir! Sir! Wait, may tatanong sana kami, sir. Sige, sure, go.
Ano sa GDP? Yung nilesson niyo po kanina.
Ano ba yan? Hindi na naman kayo nakinig. Pero sige, ano ba ito, prof? Tuturo ko ulit sa inyo. Tingnan nyo, dala pa yung ano, gamit ko ah. Watch and learn. Ganito ang GDP, guys.
Ito ay gross domestic products. Economists use this measurement to determine the size of an economy at a given time and also the growth of an economy over time. GDP is defined as the one which measures the total market value of all final goods and services produced in an economy in a given year. Hatiin natin ang definition na to sa tatlo para mas mapadali. Una, total market value. Pangalawa, final goods and services. At pangatlo, produce in an economy. Let's define all the phrases. Una, total market value. The value of the goods and services are determined by the price paid for that item in the market. So kung magkakaroon tayo ng listahan ng lahat ng produkto or goods and services sa Pilipinas at pag pinag-add up natin tong lahat, makukuha natin ang GDP. We therefore conclude that the summation of prices is equal to the GDP. Next up, final goods and services. The word final here is really crucial kasi final means end user. And end user means a lot of things. Example, may isang tire company na nagbebenta ng tire sa mga automobile company. Tingin mo ba kasama yon sa GDP? Ang sagot, hindi. Pero yung nabentang automobile kasama. Always remember that the tire is just an intermediate good. Goods used in the production of final goods and services. Pero yung automobile final product na. So, the value of the tires will be reflected in the total price of the car when it's sold to the end user. Paano pag nasira ang tire mo? Di kailangan bumili sa isang tire company ng bagong tire. Kasama kaya sa GDP yon? The answer is yes. Oo, kasama. Remember that tiles sold to the end user is part of the GDP. Other excluded activities to the GDP are as follows. Una, purely financial transactions. Nahati ito sa dalawa. Ang public transfer payments. Public transfer payments are those given by the government to individual but do not contribute production in return to them, tulad ng pension. Pangalawa ay private transfer payments. This involves the transfer of funds from a private individual to another which does not entail any productive activity tulad ng pagbenta or pagbigay ng gift certificate. Next up is second-hand sales and existing assets. Hindi kasama ang mga used items. Hindi rin kasama ang mga na-include na sa GDP last year. Always remember that, okay? So, next up is underground economy. Pwede natin itong hatiin sa dalawang types. Una ay the illegal activities tulad ng mga drug trades. Siyempre naman, hindi kasama sa GDP yun. Illegal yun eh. Hindi rin kasama ang mga legal activities but without permit tulad ng tutorial services, okay? Unpaid productive activities hindi rin kasama sa GDP tulad ng mga voluntarism. Ito ay tinatawag na selfless services. Next ay produce in an economy. So, caution, tandaan, only goods and services produced within the borders of a country counts in the nation's GDP. So, for example, ang Japan nag-produce sa Pilipinas ng mga products Kasama ba to sa GDP natin? Oo, kasi dito sila nag-produce within the borders of our country. Therefore, pag tayo nag-produce sa Japan, syempre, hindi rin to kasama sa GDP natin. Okay? Okay. So, punta naman tayo sa classification ng GDP. Para mas maintindihan natin ang classification, always remember that since the change of price is inevitable, the change in GDP is hard to monitor. Therefore, as an example, the increase of GDP of a country. Pag nag-increase ang GDP, it could mean three things. It could mean an increase of price in the goods and services. It could also mean an increase of production in the goods and services. It could be a mixture of both A and B. Therefore, makakatulong to para mas maintindihan natin kung ano ba ang GDP na dalawang classification or ba't natin to hinati sa dalawa. Ang GDP or ang una, ang nominal GDP or ang adjusted form, I define as the value at current price of final goods and services produced within a country for a specific period of time. At ang pangalawa ay ang real GDP or ang adjusted form. Ito ay ang value at constant price of final goods and services produced within a country for a specific period of time. So, bigay ko na ang dalawang formulas for GDP. Shall I? Una, ang nominal GDP. Ito ay equal sa price times quantity. Okay? So, ano naman ang formula ng real GDP? It is equal to nominal GDP over price index times 100. Okay? So, ano ba ang price index? Price index is the ratio of the price of the current year and the price of the base year multiplied by 100. The base year is the point of reference from constant price of quantity of goods and services are taken. This is usually represented by our normal economic condition. Applying the base year as the benchmark, we can now determine how much goods and services are produced over a span of time. Real GDP reflects only the change of the quantity of goods and services holding the price at a constant level. Considering the variety of products produced in an economy, it is necessary to have the price index that will be used to divide the total current value of production. By keeping the price at a constant level, it is now more accurate to compare economic performance from different years. Perspective in terms of the actual quantity of production of goods and services rather than the market value of all goods and services. Price index deflates the value of the nominal GDP. It is also called as GDP deflator, which can be computed as follows. GDP deflator is equal to nominal GDP over real GDP times 100. Sorry kung madali nagmamadali na kasi ako guys, okay?
Dapat may homework kayo sa akin.
Sige,
Ikaw,
sir,
Sedi,
Dami na
alamin mo
gagawin.
yung mga approaches ng GDP, paano ba yung kukumputin? Okay? Ikaw naman, Thomas. Alamin mo yung GRDE at saka GRDP Ano yung pinagkaiba ng dalawang yun? May pinagkaiba yun. Tsaka, para naman alam nyo rin yung sa international, anuhin nyo rin yung GNI. Research mo. Ikaw, GNI, GRDP. Ikaw ano?
Approaches, sir.
So, aasahan ko yan sa Lunes.
Yes, sir. So, ito yung na-research ko tungkol dito sa approaches to GDP accounting. In our country, the National Statistical Coordination Board, or NSCB, uses the industrial origin approach and expenditure approach as the basic approaches to GDP accounting. So, first, we will tackle about the industrial origin approach, or tinatawag nitong production approach. The production approach calculates the GDP based on industrial origin, wherein the domestic economy is divided into three productive sectors. These three productive sectors are agriculture, fishery, and forestry, industry, and then lastly, the services. In this approach, pagsasama-samahin lang natin lahat ng kontribusyon nitong tatlong sektor na to para makuha natin ang total contribution of these three sectors to the economy. Pwede tayong makakuha ng mga data on the value added of these sectors from the producer surveys like agricultural surveys, crop and livestock statistics, manufacturing surveys, surveys of the trade sector, and others. And now, we have the expenditure approach. Meanwhile, the expenditure approach sums up the expenses of the institutional sectors. The institutional sectors include the personal consumption expenditures of household. This is the expenditures by households on goods and services. It includes spending for food and non-alcoholic beverages, tobacco, clothing and footwear, housing, water, electricity, gas and other fuels, furnishings, household equipment, and routine household maintenance, health, transport, communication, recreation and culture, education, and miscellaneous goods and services. For the next one, we have the investment or capital formation. This is the expenditure by the businesses. The gross domestic capital formation has two main components: fixed capital and changes in stocks. Fixed capital includes construction, durable equipment, breeding stocks, and orchard development, intellectual property products. And for the third one, we have the government consumption. This is the expenditure on goods and services by the government. It includes the spending done by the government on the salaries and wages of public servants and daily operations, basic services such as education, health, and in contrary, transfer payments done by the government are excluded. And lastly, we have the exports and imports. For the exports, these are the expenditures on domestically produced goods and services by foreigners. The value of exports is added in the computation of GDP. And for the imports, these are the expenditures on foreign goods and services by domestic residents. The value of imports is deducted in the computation of the GDP. And for expenditure approach, we will use this formula for computation of GDP. GDP is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. For the last part, we have the X minus M, or the difference between exports and imports. It will also called the net exports. The value of net exports can either be positive or negative. It is positive whenever exports exceed imports, which is also called as a trade surplus. And it is negative when imports exceed exports, which is also known as a trade deficit. Note that both the production expenditure approaches must yield the same result of GDP. This is because output from the production of goods and services is, by economic definition, equal to the total expenditures on goods and services. There's an additional item for the expenditure approach to GDP accounting, which is the statistical discrepancy. It is not considered as an expenditure item. Statistical discrepancy is the value of the discrepancy arising from the difference in the computations between industrial origin and expenditure approaches. It will be added to the expenditure approaches. It will be added to the expenditure approach whenever the value of the GDP using industrial origin approach is greater than the value of GDP using the expenditure approach. Otherwise, it should be deducted.
GRDE versus GRDP. Ang GRDE o Gross Regional Domestic Expenditure ay ang gastos sa personal consumption o sa sariling pangangailangan, sa investment o sa pamumuhunan at sa government consumption or pangangailangan ng gobyerno ng bawat rehiyon. Ang pondong ginamit sa mga gastos na ito ay nanggaling sa pinagdagdag na national income accounts. May kasama na rin dito ang mga gastos sa ibang parte ng mundo o tinatawag na net exports. Ang GRDP naman o Gross Regional Domestic Product ay ginagamit sa pagsukat ng value ng goods and services ng lahat ng producer ng tatlong pangunahing sektor na ekonomiya na agriculture, industry, and services sa bawat rehiyon. GDP versus GNI naman. Ang GDP o Gross Domestic Product ay ginagamit sa pagsukat sa lagay ng ekonomiya. Sinusukat nito ang halaga ng pinal na goods and services na na-produce domestically o sa loob lamang ng bansa. Pero kapag sinama naman natin ang value ng mga goods and services ng mga mamamayang Pilipino sa ibang bansa, ito naman ay tinatawag na GNI o Gross National Product. Ang formula sa pagkuha ng GNI ay GNI equals GDP plus or minus net primary income from abroad. Ang net primary income from abroad naman ay ang difference ng mga pagpasok at paglabas ng income. Ang pagpasok ng income o inflows ay ang value ng compensation at property income na natatanggap ng Pilipinas mula abroad. Ang paglabas naman ng income o outflows ay ang value ng compensation at property income na pinapadala sa abroad. Sa formulang ito, kailan nga ba ibinabawas o idinadagdag ang net primary income from abroad? Wait, search ko muna. Okay. Kapag positive ang NPI, ibig sabihin mas malaki ang pagpasok ng income kumpara sa paglabas nito. Kapag positive ang NPI, ito ay idadagdag sa GDP. Kapag negative naman ang NPI, ibig sabihin mas malaki ang paglabas ng income kumpara sa pagpasok nito. Kapag negative ang NPI, ito ay ibabawas sa GDP.